Welcome, everybody. It's Thursday, March 6th at the time of this recording, and this is exciting. It's kind of a moody, rainy day for me. I'm outside in my little house that we're building, and I think I'm going to stay warm enough. So if you see me doing this, it's because I'm in an unfinished house, and it's a little cold today, and that's going to be just fine. So hope that's not too distracting for you guys. Again, welcome. My name is Sarah Vizzani. I am a Master Herbalist, and I specialize in helping and supporting women who are planning to become pregnant, all the way through postpartum and beyond. Some of you will be watching this in my private Facebook group, specifically for women in that category, but you can also just join if you just want to learn how to be healthier. There's plenty of stuff that kind of applies to everyone, but that is my private Facebook group is called the Herb Powered Pregnancy. And you can just search herb-powered pregnancy in Facebook, and you'll see the group pop up and you can request to join. And I'd love to see you there if you're not there already. And invite your friends. I think we all know people that, sometimes we're really passionate about a certain topic, or, we've gone down lots of rabbit holes, and we want our friends to come with us. So, and our dear ones. So that's really good. Okay. So like I said, I'm a Master Herbalist. I'm a homesteader, and we're building this little house. And let me introduce Richelle. Richelle is a certified professional midwife. She's been assisting childbirth in the home, practicing the art of midwifery for over 24 years. Richelle received her call to midwifery in 1996 when she had a dream that she was assisting one of her sisters to give birth. I love dreams. That's so great. She graduated from the Utah College of Midwives and then went on to certify with North American Registry of Midwives as a certified professional midwife. Since that time, she has assisted over 800 women to bring their babies into this world. So how many babies is that if it was 800 women?
Well, it's more because some of those were twins. So
yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah. I love that you do twin births. Okay. And almost all of them giving birth in their homes. Richelle puts an emphasis on health and nutrition with her clients, applying the knowledge she acquired from personal study and from experience utilizing natural remedies. Her focus and fulfillment is in the role she plays as mentor, guide, teacher, and support. She directs parents to place faith and trust in God and to believe in their ability to receive inspired guidance as stewards over their pregnancies, babies, and births. Ultimately, her desire is for God to be glorified through her work. Yay! So welcome, Richelle. I'm so grateful that you were willing to do this with me. And just so everyone knows, I plan to interview additional people in the birth and pregnancy and postpartum world as time goes on. So if you would like to be interviewed at some point, because that applies to you, send me a message and we'll chat. So I have a handful of questions. My first question is it common for midwives to be educated in using herbs in their practice, or is that unique?
I would say it's somewhat unique, but so first of all, let's make a distinction between nurse midwives and midwives like myself that assist birth and outside of the hospital. I would say nurse midwives pretty much no. They're definitely more medical, but I think in general they're more willing to learn about herbs and maybe suggest them. But yeah, as far as speaking of midwives like myself, I think that generally there is an acceptance of utilizing natural remedies and maybe a desire, but then of course there's quite a range of from no knowledge to, those like myself, where I utilize the use of these natural remedies on a regular basis. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So do you think that's a good question when a woman is interviewing potential midwives?
Yeah, I've had potential clients ask me that question a lot.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I know
I heard that you're knowledgeable in this field, and so that I like that. Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah, I know before I had studied the herbs and I was doing my first home birth with my third baby back in the city. And that was a key concern that I had is, okay, potential midwife, what knowledge do you have of herbs? I'm concerned about these, ABC possibilities. What would you do if such a thing happened? And she was, I don't, well, she was like you, to a certain extent, and was able to say like, oh yeah, we use this for this, that we do that for that, we do. And so I felt quite comfortable, moving forward with planning my home birth, which was great. um, okay. Now what if someone is planning a hospital birth or required to have a hospital birth or anything in between, but they're ending up having a hospital birth. Um, if they, whether they are using a CNM as their provider or an OB, can they use herbs during their birth?
Um, I would say yes, but don't let them know, because most well, I would say pretty much anybody in the medical field would well, most people in the medical field don't have trust in natural remedies. They don't have understanding, and
Mhm.
therefore they don't have trust. And so they're going to them, the safe thing is to say, no, don't take any. And so yeah, honestly, that's, if you're going to use them, I recommend you don't tell them. That's just how it is.
Yeah, and I would say try to get as much of your own education,
Mhm.
um because I mean this is the other thing. Let's just say that, okay, you watch this video or you see a list online and it says, oh, I should have these 3 tinctures with me at my birth.
Mhm.
And then you're at your birth and something happens and there's no one knowledgeable with you and you have no idea how to use them.
Mhm.
You kind of might as well not even have them, you know?
Yeah.
um, and so that's, my advice to people is if you are going to be the one bringing the herbs to the table, so to speak, you know, you want to do your research and maybe run the play in your mind of, if this happens, here's what to do. But even more so, because, when a woman goes into labor land, she
Mhm.
may be able to explain these details to whoever's supporting her, but she may not. And so having these kind of things written down and talking through it with, whoever it is, your doula, your husband, your midwife, would help.
Yeah. And shall we define labor land for,
Oh,
help it
yeah, please
clear?
do.
So
Mhm.
labor land, we use that term for the state that the ideal state for a birthing woman to be in, where she goes away from the frontal cortex into her primal brain, and she's just um, kind of goes into her own world and goes into her instincts, and she's just in touch with her body, and she's just wrapped in this whole process of wrapped in the process of what her body is doing to give birth to her baby. So
Yes. And I mean, would you agree that that's sort of the goal of anyone trying to create an ideal birth environment would be creating the kind of space where a woman can enter into that?
yeah, because you've got to have a safe place and a place where you feel uninhibited. Um, yeah, mainly safe, right? And supported. Mhm.
Absolutely. Awesome. Okay. Oh, and I didn't say this at the beginning. So just as a reminder to everyone, nothing that we say has been approved or evaluated by the FDA. We're not here to diagnose, treat, or prescribe. We are, in my case, I'm an educator. In Richelle Chase, she is Richelle's case, she is a professional birth worker. And so just a reminder to everyone. And also we're not here to poo-poo the medical establishment either. But we do want to just show, or I should say the questions that I'm asking and the comments I'm making are an intent to show for those who may not realize, you know, in a hospital setting, the OB or the ER doctor, whoever, they're an authority figure. And they have been educated on many things. And they have many policies and procedures that they are required to adhere to, or they lose their job or their license. And it's not to say, I'm definitely not here to say, don't follow the advice of your doctor. I'm here to help empower you with additional information that your doctor may not have, simply because they don't study these things. It's not, you know, their work is in the hospital setting, in the operating room setting, and things like this. And so, yeah, did that make sense? Did I complete my thought on that?
I think so.
Okay. So, you know, if I went to an auto mechanic, so here's like an extreme example. I wouldn't go to an auto mechanic and ask them what I should make for dinner and consider them an expert.
Yep.
You know, and so there is going to be a natural mistrust or hesitation on behalf of someone trained conventionally to allow their patients to use alternative things that they know nothing about, or have read studies that are often done in a way that is not accurate to an actual holistic use of these medicinal plants. Often the studies are using standardized extracts, they're injecting them into the organs of baby mice. You know, it's just like completely out of context of real world. And thousands of years of experience of using wholesome herbs in wholesome ways. All right, I think I've harped on that enough. So yeah, and so I put this in the description, but just so it's in the video as well. I hope that anyone watching this now or in the future will find this video helpful, whether they are planning a hospital birth, or if they're planning a home birth with a midwife, or if they're planning a home birth without a midwife. I'm not here to necessarily champion that idea. I know lots of people who have done that very successfully. And so this can help any of you. But please, please, please educate yourself and have on hand what you need to have, so that you can have a safe experience in every way, emotionally safe, physically safe, and everything like that. All right. Okay. So Richelle, what herbs, now to the heart of the matter, what herbs or herbal combinations, pick maybe 3 or 5 if that's too few.
Okay.
Which ones do you think every woman should have on hand at birth, or make sure that their midwife has on hand at their birth?
Okay. Well, I would say the first 3 that come to mind are cotton root, shepherd's purse, and some kind of an antispasmodic, whether that be a blend or just skullcap or just black haw. And I can explain. So cotton root, I have found to be the best herb that I know of to help the uterus contract. And so I utilize cotton root frequently to control postpartum bleeding.
Okay.
To prevent hemorrhage, postpartum hemorrhage. And so that and shepherd's purse, right? I most people are, I think, well, anyway, you're aware that shepherd's purse is also an anti-hemorrhagic. It stops bleeding. And it also helps the uterus contract. And so I utilize those two to control bleeding, to prevent, control, and manage postpartum hemorrhage. And And then as far as the antispasmodic, that does the opposite. So you wouldn't want to give a woman an antispasmodic when she's hemorrhaging postpartum. But that is something that I have utilized during labor for a woman who just is is really tense, and she can't, she's having a hard time surrendering to the process. Then I'll give her antispasmodics, or sometimes women will get like a spasm in the lower abdomen. And so I'll just apply it topically right over the area. So yeah, that can be very valuable. But then another herb that I utilize is licorice root. Licorice root is a really good support for the adrenal glands. So when I'm working, for example, with a mom who's giving birth for the first time, and sometimes their labors are quite long and they don't get good, a lot of sleep, they might get to the point where they're starting to get really tired. And so I'll give them my licorice root glycerite. So it's in glycerin. Not that it has to be, but it tastes better that way. and and that will give them a boost and support their adrenal glands to then support them through the rest of the process. If I could add another one,
Yeah.
it's not an herb, it's a rescue remedy. So
Yes.
rescue remedy is a flower remedy. So it's a Bach flower remedy. Dr. Bach discovered that the energy frequencies of flowers help us in different ways, and he put together this formula of flower remedy energies, or essences, I guess is what they call it. And it's helpful for any kind of distress: mental distress, emotional distress, physical distress. So I've got it in the spray form, so I'll often spray some of that in my clients' mouths in transition.
Uh,
Mhm.
could you explain what transition is for those who may not know yet?
Oh yeah. Being in this field for so long, you forget that you think everybody knows these things. So transition is that very last part of the labor process, or the very last dilation phase of the labor process before the body goes into pushing and bringing the baby out. So the process gets more and more and more and more and more intense. And so that last part is called transition. Mhm.
Oh, what I like to say is transition is usually right when you've hit the point where you're pretty sure you can't go on and that you're not going to get through the process. That's usually about, I feel, when, you're in transition and you might start getting ready to push. And it's like, just when you think you can't do it anymore, you're almost there. You're almost
Yep.
done.
Yep.
And you can do it.
Man, I've been so impressed with the resiliency of women through all these years, watching all these women go through this process. We're so resilient. And so it's such a beautiful process to me, because women get to see how enduring they are, or what's the word? Can't think of the word, but anyway, how enduring they are, how much they can do.
Yeah.
And God designed it that way so that they could take that understanding, that experience of going through something so hard that they thought they could never, they didn't think they could do it, but they did it. And so now they're more equipped to raise their child that they just gave birth to, because they know they can do hard things. Maybe they feel like they could do anything, after they went through that process.
Yes, but it is also okay to feel maybe for at least 5 minutes, I'm not sure I want to do that ever again.
Oh, absolutely. That's totally normal.
Yes, yes. I know I can fall victim to, comparing my experience to others. And I do think it's very valuable for women to read and watch as many birth stories as they can. Granted, there are plenty of like horror stories out there, that maybe would not be a good idea to read all of those, depending on how sensitive a person is. If they can use it maybe as education of how to avoid things, then power be to them to read it. But I was going somewhere with this. Oh, it's easy to read somebody's birth story, which usually if they're posting it, they're going to be very,
Selective in what they share.
and just things to remember of like birth is really messy and it's really hard. And it's really awesome.
Mhm.
And if you don't, like, I had to tell myself not to get down on myself after seeing, it was interesting in 2020 because more women than ever were giving birth at home for a variety of reasons. And there was this one group I was in where women were posting, pictures of, they had just given birth or claimed they had just given birth. But they looked wonderful and rested already and everything.
Yeah.
And there was one woman holding her newborn and going like this, and she just looked so powerful and triumphant and wonderful. And I was like, yes, that's what I want to feel like and be like at the end of my home birth. And I did not feel like that, and I did not look like that, even though the birth went very well. But it was I definitely fell into that trap of like, well, I'm supposed to feel powerful and energized and oh.
Well, and it's just like, for example, the grieving process. Everybody goes through the grieving process differently. So every
Mm.
woman is going to experience childbirth and her psychological state in that experience differently. Wouldn't you say that you did have that feeling, but it came later, or it was expressed
Yes.
differently, or yeah.
Yes. Yeah, it came later for sure. Yeah. So I know it's easy for people to hear others talking about, the benefits of a home birth and an unmedicated birth and maybe want to defend the other ways of doing things, a cesarean, whether planned or emergency, or, using the epidural or Pitocin or these other things. And I'm not here to say any of those things are bad. And that if that is what ends up needing to happen, then okay, like that's another reason to gather a good birth team around you, so that they can support you in whatever changes happen versus what you visualized or hoped for. But also kind of like the breastfeeding versus bottle feeding argument and formula argument and discussions and everything. There is undeniable evidence that the more naturally we can do things, the better outcomes for mother and baby. And so that is the ideal that I try to empower women towards. But obviously, anyone watching, you have the freedom to choose what you want to do. But I do hope that you will empower yourself with the information, and support group around you that can help you do things as physiologically normal, and unintervened as you wish and hopefully as possible. Obviously there's always going to be exceptions. And so that's my goal, empowered mothers.
I love that.
Okay, so speaking of, unplanned issues or complications during birth, you've talked about what you use for excess bleeding or hemorrhaging. And you've talked about the antispasmodic. Is there anything that you use in particular if a woman's placenta is not delivering within a certain time frame? And I know there's a lot of different opinions on what that time frame should be, but
Yes, Angelica root. It works.
Okay.
Every time I I think every single time I've had a situation where there was a delay in the release of the placenta from the uterine wall, um, and I've given a dropper or two of Angelica, it's within 4 minutes, maybe within 3 minutes, it will come out or it will detach. And the reason why I want to distinguish something. So there is, so the placenta detaches and then it can just sit there. And it could sit there for an hour before the uterus might push it out. Um, so, but the longer it sits in there, the higher the bleed. Because if there's anything in the uterus, it will prevent the uterus from contracting and contracting down effectively to clamp off the blood vessels that were going to the placenta.
Mhm.
And uh, so if you want to prevent heavy bleeding or hemorrhage, then you want that placenta out as soon as it has detached. And so there is that distinction because some people think, oh, I've heard women say it took an hour for my placenta to detach. And so I'm thinking, well, did it take an hour for it to detach or did it take an hour for it to come out? It's two different things. So um I kind of forgot the point I was making, but anyway, I think I made my point.
Okay, so the Angelica root, and I think you used this with me because I do have a history of the placenta taking a little longer.
Okay.
And so the Angelica root, for whatever reason, signals to the
Yeah.
body to detach the placenta,
Uh-huh.
but it does not have anything to do with the process of of the placenta actually coming out.
Maybe it does have some effect on getting the uterus to contract. Maybe it does that too. I'm not sure. I'm guessing it does actually.
Okay. That's interesting. Okay, so then when the placenta detaches, it's okay for it to wait in the uterus, or it is not okay. We still want it to.
Well, in some cases it's fine. See, when I was a younger midwife, I was like, oh, okay, yeah, physiological birth. Let's just all natural, which is my general approach. Okay. But I've learned to be more active, to more actively manage the stage, that third stage, which is the stage where the baby's out and now the placenta needs to come out.
Mhm.
Because I've had in my history, I had so many cases where I was just waiting for the placenta to come on its own. And finally, when it would come, there was a huge hemorrhage behind it. See, because when the placenta detaches and the membranes are fused, okay? The
Mhm.
membranes are bag. It's actually bags because it's two thin membranes that are fused together. The bags that are fused, or that the baby is in, are fused to the inside of the uterus. The placenta detaches, and then it kind of the weight of the placenta can then bring down or shear away that adhesion of the bags to the sides of the uterus. And a lot of times there can be like a slit in the bags so that there is bleeding that comes out, but sometimes there's an occluded pocket there. And so we don't see any blood, so we think, oh, everything's fine.
Mm.
But there's actually a hemorrhage going on inside behind the placenta. And so that's why I've learned to, well, and so let me back up. So in as a young midwife, I I had lots of experiences where I was waiting and then finally when it came out, then I realized there was hemorrhaging going on. So to prevent that, I'm looking for all the cues that the placenta has detached. And once I know I'm confident or I know it has detached, then I just want it out. And so I'll wait for a contraction and tell my client that she's in a contraction because they don't feel them right away, right after the birth, like within that first half hour or so, they don't feel the contraction. And so I'll tell her, okay, you're going into a contraction because I can feel abdominally. And
Mm.
then I ask her to push and then I guide the placenta out. And that way we don't get a clot building up in there. We don't, have an occluded hemorrhage. We get the placenta out so it can just do its job effectively. The uterus can do its job effectively.
Right.
Stop the bleeding.
Right. And then if there is bleeding, we bring out the cotton root and the shepherd's purse. Chew a little
There
placenta.
are other herbs that I give as well for postpartum hemorrhage, but those are my two favorite.
Yeah. How often do you think you give a little piece of the placenta for mother to chew?
Maybe 10% of my births,
Okay.
I'll request that she chew on it, and most of the time they're willing to do it.
Yeah.
Or we can quickly make a smoothie and blend up a piece of the placenta in the smoothie.
That'd be a fast smoothie. Wow. Okay. So do you bring a little NutriBullet to your birthday?
I don't. We just use their blender.
Okay. Okay. Well, that's really interesting. I know for me, during my labor process, I had been having on and off labor, we'll say, for several days. And because you were 2 hours away from me, I didn't want you to come when it wasn't real. And so by the time I called you, it was very real and you barely made it. And so that was actually my first birth that I did not do what many people recommend, whether if you're like overdue or if you believe you're in labor, which is to drink a decoction of red raspberry leaf tea to help the effectiveness of the uterus. I had previously done that even in my hospital births. And I believe it did help. But with this birth, because there was so little time for you to get there, I didn't have any of that. And it was
You mean
focusing
because you
on
didn't want to speed up the process? Is that
exactly.
Oh.
Yes, yes. But I was making it. It was really funny when I realized it was finally go time and I got my kids in bed. I put 4 pots on my stovetop, and one was to make the decoction, which I ended up using postpartum. So there you go. If you don't use it during your labor, it's excellent during postpartum.
Uh-huh.
And then I was juicing beets, probably some carrots and apples as well, just as like an energy juice thing and for blood support.
Perfect.
And then I also made Dr. Christopher's shock drink, which I need to repost the recipe for. Let me see if I can pull it up really quick. I don't like how Facebook, I have to exit any new messages that have come in since the last time I'm looking at the screen. Oh, come on. So the shock drink, I don't want to take too much time, but was recommended by Diane Bjornson, who founded the Utah College, Midwife College, right?
It used to be called the College of, now I can't remember. College of Utah Midwives.
Okay. Yeah. And she actually did some guest lectures for Dr. Christopher's school. So I watched some of her lectures in my Master Herbalist program. So to learn that link with everything was pretty cool. That she was part of the midwife school. So the shock drink, I'll just read it. It's a historical remedy used during labor and birth, consumed by the mouthful during labor to provide energy, pain relief, and support the birthing process. So in my case, I was very tired. I didn't want to speed anything up, but I needed some emotional and physical support to feel like I could make it through this very fast marathon that I was suddenly on, and also worrying if my midwife would make it in time. Anyway, so it's a cup of warm water, 2 tablespoons of honey, 1 tablespoon of apple cider vinegar, 2 teaspoons of cayenne pepper, and half a teaspoon of ginger. So that's the official recipe. I am pretty sure what I did is I made a ginger tea. So I simmered some fresh ginger root in water and strained it. And then I added the honey, the ACV, and the cayenne pepper. And that was really good. Now, ginger is an antispasmodic. And cayenne is helpful for pain, shock, energy, and even bleeding. So I'm curious about this interaction, you know, because you said you don't want the antispasmodic if there's bleeding happening. But I wonder if having the cayenne with the ginger, you know, then you're getting the antispasmodic during the labor process. But the cayenne might mediate if there is a hemorrhage going on, if the ginger was kind of contributing to that. What do you think about that?
If I understand correctly, ginger would be considered a mild antispasmodic. Yeah, I don't think that it would be as effective, for example, as cramp bark or as skullcap to calm the muscles.
Right.
So I don't think that that would be an issue.
Okay. Great. Okay, awesome. Yeah, so just to complete that story, those were the 2 things I was drinking during my birth. And I had also made some date balls that if I needed some energy during the labor or even postpartum, it was really easy to be lying there and just reach over to my little jar of date balls and put one in my mouth for recovery. So that's another.
Dates have been proven to reduce the frequency and intensity of postpartum hemorrhage. So
there you go.
Yeah, there are studies that prove that.
Yeah. And they've also studied using dates before labor, right? To
Prep
to
the
tone the
body.
uterus. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Ripen the cervix and all that. Sorry, I just think it's a funny phrase. Okay, cool. And I know that I also use shepherd's purse tincture for the postpartum. I know some people call them the afterbirth pains, but the postpartum contractions.
Uh-huh.
Is there another word for them that I'm not thinking of right now?
I call them afterbirth contractions.
Okay.
So
Afterbirth contractions.
mm-hmm.
Yeah. And so I know whenever I would feel one starting, I would put another dropper full in my mouth of shepherd's purse.
And did you find that really helped? Because I haven't had clients utilize that in that way.
I think it helped a lot more. That I think my previous birth, I used like the Wish Garden After Ease. But my midwife was sort of, when I told her like, oh, I have this to use, she kind of seemed hesitant about it. Like, you know, I don't love it when women use that. And so I didn't use very much of it. And as we know, when you're dealing with pain or a lot of tension or a large experience and you only use a little bit of herbs, you don't always get the effect you're looking for.
I'd like to share with you how I instruct clients to utilize something like the After Ease formula.
Great.
First of all, I tell them do not use it for at least 8 hours postpartum because it's an antispasmodic. Okay.
Right.
And so that first, 8 hours or that first little while after birth, we want to do everything we can to prevent heavy bleeding. And so that's why I say don't use it for at least 8 hours. And then my advice is that they only utilize it twice in a 24-hour period and that they make it count. So if the baby's asleep and the whole family's asleep and you are so tired but you can't sleep because of those afterbirth contractions, then take 4 whole dropperfuls, make it count, and then it will be effective. Then you'll be able to sleep. But I believe you should only do that like twice in a 24-hour period.
Okay, that's really good to know. Now, of course, those first 8 hours is when the cramping is the most intense.
I know.
And so that's where I would say the shepherd's purse, I do believe it helped. It's not gonna help the same way that whatever it is they gave me after my first hospital birth.
Yeah.
I did an unmedicated birth, but I
Okay.
definitely took like the Percocet or whatever it is.
Mm.
After I went through the first postpartum contractions, and I was like, oh, okay. I need something because I
Well,
needed
that was after
nothing.
your first, huh? Most women don't feel those after their first.
I was very tense. I tend to be a tense person. And I had just because of the way I was pushing and being coached to push and everything, I created spasms in my back that were
Oh.
unbearable.
Oh.
And my baby wasn't nursing because she was tongue-tied and all of this. So I was very stressed and in a lot of pain.
You know, in a situation like that where women are experiencing additional pain, like back spasms, and
Yeah.
she didn't have a postpartum hemorrhage, and her bleeding seems normal, then yeah, I would say start using it right away. But
Yeah.
maybe use it a little bit sparingly, or
Right.
like you wouldn't want to have tons of it, like taking a dropper every hour or something. But
Yeah. Yeah. So I found that the shepherd's purse did help. In addition to the technique of kind of pressing on the uterus when I was having a contraction after birth. Again, that's
yeah,
what we're talking
holding it.
about.
Another
Mhm.
technique similar to that would be to roll up a hand towel, and then you just lay on your abdomen over that hand towel, where that hand towel is over your uterus. See, because the reason why the uterus hurts is because it relaxes, it does intermittent contractions. So it's relaxing and then it's going into a contraction. And when it's going into that contraction, that's where the pain comes in. But
Mm,
if you can keep it small in the first place, by laying on a rolled up towel, or binding your abdomen with a rolled up towel or something that will inside the binder that will press onto your uterus,
mm.
and that can help. Yeah, just like you found.
Yeah, I know you helped me wrap. I just used a Moby wrap, baby wrap, that you helped wrap around my uterus. And I do think that helped a lot.
Mhm.
Um, the one thing I found out later was, obviously you did it for me, so you knew what you were doing. But if you've never bound your belly before, this is a traditional thing, but you do need to do it correctly, or
Yes.
you could apply too much pressure on that area and end up causing new problems for yourself.
Yeah, in other words, you bind low and you're holding the uterus up, as opposed to cinching at the waist. If you cinch at the waist, that's super bad. You never
Yeah.
want to do that in those those weeks postpartum, because that will cause pressure onto the pelvic floor, downward pressure onto the pelvic floor. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. All right. I would love for you to speak now to oh, hold on, can I see
Yeah, Kim
this?
says I utilize heating. Oh, it left.
Okay, let me pull it up. I utilize heating on my back to help with after pains, especially while nursing. Oh yeah.
Yeah, so that can be helpful. There's also
Yeah.
an acupressure point called spleen 6, SP-6, and it's
Mm-hmm.
on the inside of the leg, about 5 finger breadths above the ankle. And
Ah,
pressing on that during these afterbirth contractions can help ease them to some degree.
yeah. Especially if you can get your husband or birth support person
Yeah.
to do that for you.
Uh-huh.
Yes. Okay. So, I would love for you to spend a moment on, um, what have you seen in your practice, a connection between birth complications or absence of them and the health of the woman or specific things she did in her pregnancy?
Yes, I have. So I for example, the one time that I had a really early rupture of membranes, or had a client with a really early rupture of membranes, this was a gal that was either 19 or 20 years old. She had a terrible diet, and her gums looked very unhealthy. I if, maybe a dentist would have, diagnosed her with gingivitis or whatever. And she had a rupture of membranes at 32 weeks, and just, of course, transferred out of my care, and was in the hospital for a few weeks, and then they induced her at 34, about 34 weeks. So of course, then her baby was in the NICU, very complicated. And I'm very confident that if she had been eating a healthy diet, then she would have had a healthy mouth and healthy bacteria, and she would not have had that rupture of membranes. And the reason why I word it that way is because it's a known fact in the medical world that gingivitis contributes to higher rates of early rupture of membranes. And it's because the bacteria, the microbiome is off. And so then I guess the explanation is, then if the microbiome is off in your gut and mouth, it's also going to be off in your vagina. And then you're more likely to have bad bacteria that don't belong there, or that are better off, in lower amounts or whatever. And so I believe that's the explanation, that the bad bacteria cause inflammation that cause the membranes to rupture early. Something that I've seen that I'm convinced about is that the diet, but also supplements. So I promote what I term food source prenatal vitamins, whether that be that the vitamins and minerals are literally extracted from food, or that a friendly microorganism is grown, and with that microorganism, they create these nutrients, because somehow when you feed these microorganisms iron, for example, then somehow they ingest it, and then they make it into a food form. And so, for example, the Pure Synergy brand or the Mega Food brand, these are a couple of brands of companies that make a product like I'm describing. And so when my clients have a healthy diet and they take a supplement like, prenatal, like I'm describing, their membranes are the bag, or the membranes that the baby is in, always tend to be healthier, thicker, just healthy and thicker. And so therefore, less likely to rupture early, and very protective for the baby. So I've seen that pretty consistently. And then just like, oh, for sure, if you follow a healthy diet during pregnancy, you are far less likely to develop disorders of pregnancy like preeclampsia, hypertension, gestational diabetes. Absolutely. So I always, at the first or initial prenatal appointments with my clients, I give them a handout that lays out basic nutrition recommendations. And I know everybody's coming from a different place with their diet, but I encourage them to make goals to hopefully get to where they're complying with all of my diet recommendations. And that's why I have a low rate of gestational diabetes. That's why I have a low rate of preeclampsia and these other disorders. So.
Oh, absolutely. Kim asks, what is your opinion on the brewer's diet?
So my opinion about that is that if you're comparing the standard American diet and the brewer's diet, go with the brewer's diet. Okay? But and also I believe that our blood types that our systems, our chemistry and our metabolisms, our systems are unique to our blood types.
Mm.
And so I believe that the brewer's diet is generally good for people with type O blood. That's
Mm.
my opinion, and that's my experience. But I have actually adapted the brewer's diet to
Oh.
what I think is healthier.
Mm-hmm.
So, for example, he says to drink so many glasses of milk for your protein, or sorry, for your calcium.
Mm.
So, but I say, well, here are high calcium options, including a glass of carrot juice,
Mm-hmm.
a half cup or a fourth cup of sesame seeds, so I give
Yeah.
them a serve. What would be a serve, or examples of servings of, you know, so many grams of calcium, but from
Mm-hmm.
plant sources.
Yeah.
Um, and then I added a category, and that is fermented foods, because
Mm.
fermented foods are our best source of probiotics. They're so important for a healthy gut, which is so important for health overall. And so, yeah. So I believe my adaptation to the brewer's diet is the best. But like I said, for sure, if somebody's eating the standard American diet and then they're presented with a brewer's diet, please do the brewer's diet. If it's a choice between those 2. Mhm.
Yeah, and I would say, you can do any diet. Well, not every diet, but for many diets, you can do them in a healthy way or an unhealthy way, but pretty much any diet that is going to reduce or eliminate your processed foods and your sugar is going to be a step in the right direction. You're
Right.
going to feel better. You might feel a little worse at first while you're detoxing all the
Yeah.
junk out. But that would be a net benefit. My experience with the brewer's diet. So for my third baby, I started having rising blood pressure in my third trimester, which I had never ever had before. And I've talked about this in other videos in my group that you guys can go watch. But and so it was my very last month, and my blood pressure just kept going up. And I usually run low in my blood pressure, or at least I did until basically eating the way I've been eating for the last 4 or 5 years. I was always low. And so this was quite concerning for my midwife that my blood pressure was going up. Obviously, we start worrying about preeclampsia and hypertension and everything. And at the time, I had heard of the brewer's diet, and I was on kind of like a Weston A. Price diet for that pregnancy. And so I was like, okay, I'm just going to start eating a hard-boiled egg like every hour. And it did not work. My blood pressure just kept going up. And then my wise midwife was saying, well, don't you have a prenatal tea that you drink? Drink more of that. And I made it myself. It was the basis for the prenatal tea that I now sell on herbalembrace.com. And so I just started drinking that tea by the quart, and my blood pressure went back down to a normal range.
Okay,
And
I'm
so
trying to figure this out. So prenatal tea has red raspberry, nettle, peppermint.
alfalfa.
Is the alfalfa?
So what Diane Bjornson taught in her lecture was that if a woman has either a history of hypertension and wants to prevent it, or if she's at the end and having high blood pressure, she gives them loads of alfalfa tablets.
Oh, see,
Yeah.
oh,
And especially if you're doing it now, the tea worked for me anyway, but especially if it's in the tablet form, you are getting all the protein that the alfalfa has to offer. And alfalfa is very high in protein. So it's also high in chlorophyll and every vitamin and mineral that we know about. And so I don't know if the emphasis should be that it's the protein that, is the
or
big
was it the
deal.
water?
Or is it the water? I know. So
That's
that was
too.
yeah, so that was my experience with it. But I know I had a doula with my first pregnancy who that's what she told people whenever they were trending towards high blood pressure was, oh, do the brewer diet, do the high protein. And that was not my experience. It didn't help in my experience. But if it helps some people, then I'm glad it helps
I,
them.
I see, and I think I remember your blood type. I I believe that that would more likely be helpful for someone with type O blood and
Yeah.
less likely to be helpful with someone with type A blood. So,
Yeah. Yeah. And I actually have type A, so it's interesting.
mhm.
But I don't, I don't like following all the rules, so my body does what it wants to do. Uh, okay, checking for any other questions here. While I'm looking, if you could answer the question. Ooh, okay. Okay, if you could give one last piece of advice of a woman planning out her birth, and or even, she's in pregnancy and wants to do her best um to lead up to the best birth experience possible. Um what are your top 1 to 3 points of advice? And now this can be herbal or just general.
Okay. Well, number one is to clear fear, clear any fear you have of birth. A message that I have for the world is that birth is not a traumatic, dramatic, scary experience. That's not how God designed it. God designed it. It's true that it is designed in a way that there are potential risks, there are potential complications, but God designed it that way not to instill fear. He designed it that way because therefore it's an avenue through which we can increase faith. And so um, it's such a beautiful process that perfectly prepares parents for raising their child. Um, there's the opportunity for the parents to come together and bond, and and when going through this process totally naturally, um, the chemical process that happens in a woman's body, it totally facilitates the bonding with her baby. So there's oxytocin, of course, because oxytocin is what causes the uterus to contract. But beautifully, oxytocin is also the hormone that makes us feel connected and loved and in love and that kind of thing. And so we've got oxytocin going. We've got um, if we're in a safe environment and we are being well supported, then we've also got endorphins going. Um, especially if in that support we're getting, there's hands-on, massaging and playing with the hair and telling your wife you're beautiful, you're amazing. All these things produce endorphins. And
Even when you're sweaty and your hair is everywhere and that's the right thing to say, husbands.
well, something that I've definitely seen with my husband, and I think with men in general, is that the beauty they see in their wife and their women is not physical. They're looking at the beauty of our spirits. And so when have felt my ugliest, my husband has told me I'm so beautiful.
Oh,
Anyway, so you've got endorphins and oxytocin, and there's also is it lactogen? For some reason I'm forgetting, but it's the hormone that produces milk. And
okay.
that also comes into play during labor, and it has a calming effect. And then when things get more intensified and you're getting tired and they're getting tired, then adrenaline could come into play to help get the body through the process. And so when the baby is born, mom is just filled with all of these wonderful natural chemicals, and it literally helps her bond with the baby.
Mhm.
And so it's just so perfectly designed, and including what I mentioned before about helping women to have a confidence in their ability because they went through something harder than they've ever done and they came through it. So they're taking all of this into parenthood. And so, yeah, my main message is to come to an understanding about the truth about childbirth and why God created it the way it is created. And also it involves sacrifice. But
Mhm.
anything that is sacrificed for, we add value. It adds value to that. It's all about adding value to the child. One of my favorite quotes is by Thomas Paine. That which we obtain too easily, we esteem too lightly. Um, it is dearness only that gives everything its value. Heaven knows how to put a proper price on its goods. And that perfectly applies to childbirth. And then, okay, so the second thing that I would say is super important is develop a healthy microbiome. Eat those fermented vegetables and eat the vegetables because the vegetables feed the good bacteria. And herbs do too. Herbs like ginger, they literally feed the good bacteria so that they can thrive in our gut. And the microbiome is so valuable for our health. Our health starts in our gut. If you have a healthy gut, if you don't have a healthy gut, you're going to have health problems. And so eat that sauerkraut, eat that kimchi, eat those fermented pickles, which I'm only aware of one brand, which is Bubby's.
Yes.
Or you can make your own. And so also along this line is that not only will you be healthier, but you will start your baby off with on a healthy life because studies have absolutely proven that, for example, that babies born C-section, they've done long-term studies and measured the health of those people born C-section compared to people born vaginally, and it is clear that people born vaginally are healthier, and it's because they get the microbiome from the vagina. And
And I just want to mention there, that doesn't mean it's a death sentence for your child's health if you have a C-section for whatever reason, or if you've already had a C-section before you learned about other
right,
options you may have
right,
had.
you'll have to do some more work to help.
Yeah. So
Um,
you can become aware of it and take some steps to help with it.
Yep. Yeah. Thank goodness for the grace of God. We can remedy so many things, and we can, it may take more work, but there's always a way to improve something or remedy something. So yeah. Anyway, I guess that's my answer to your question.
Love it. I love it. In case I didn't make it clear, anyone who wants to ask a question, please do so in the next 5 minutes. I know it took a minute for us to get the tech working, so we're going to give it an extra 5 minutes. Yeah, I love what you said. If anyone wants help working on their gut, I do teach a protocol that is a whole foods plant-based gut healing protocol. I've done the bone broth thing, and that can be helpful. Again, any diet where you're removing processed foods and going towards more natural foods, there is a benefit for sure. But I find that incorporating more plants and especially the herbs was really what I needed to get to that next level of really starting to overcome my health concerns. So I do have a protocol to heal the gut lining with herbs. And actually we introduced the fermented foods after that lining has been healed. Some people, if their guts are really, really wrecked, may not be able to tolerate the fermented foods right away.
Oh, yeah, those must be the people that are sensitive to, I can't remember.
Histamines, maybe?
Yes.
Yeah.
I didn't think of it, but that makes sense that that would be the explanation. That they would get the reaction because their gut is leaky. And
Mhm.
yeah, okay.
Yeah, because then even if you're putting good stuff, good, wonderful probiotic fermented foods in, if things are still getting into your bloodstream that shouldn't be there, no matter how good they are for you under normal circumstances, you can still have problems from it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Um, okay. Oh, no, that's not a real question. Okay. Sometimes we get creepers.
Kim just posted a question about red raspberry. Is it okay to, should we go into that?
Sure. What's your
Okay.
opinion on that?
So her question was, is it okay to drink raspberry all throughout the pregnancy, or like, are there limitations? So I I believe that most women can drink red raspberry any time of their life. Okay, because it just helps to balance the hormones. It supports the female system, and so in general, any woman can drink red raspberry anytime, even during pregnancy. Now the concern about red raspberry is that it causes the or can cause the uterus to contract. But I'm going to explain that that in and of itself is not a problem, because the uterus actually from the very beginning is contracting.
Oh,
Mhm. Just like any muscle of the body, it has to stay fit. So that's
yes.
how the uterus weight lifts. It contracts. And
Love
so
it.
there are few women that are aware of the first trimester uterine contractions, but most women do not feel them, but
Mm.
they are happening. And so that's why I say in and of itself, it's not a bad thing that something can cause the uterus contract. Even personally, I've read can cause the uterus to contract.
Oh, new to
There are
me. Okay.
lots of herbs that have that effect. Um,
Hmm.
so that's not a problem. But if you have a history of incompetent cervix, where the cervix opens too early and it just doesn't stay closed very competently, or or if you are having really notable strong contractions early on in the pregnancy, then yes, avoid anything that's going to contribute to the uterus contracting. So, but yeah, those are the exceptions. But in general, yes, I think it's healthy and good for women to drink or to consume red raspberry throughout the pregnancy.
Yeah, and I think it's quite sad that because of the what's the word? The more reductionist approach towards, and okay, we're gonna study the medicinal plants, but they still study them in a way that's very reductionist and not holistic,
Right.
um, has caused them to say, oh, well, red raspberry leaf causes the uterus to contract, therefore women should only drink it during their last month, and they miss out on the incredible benefits that it has for women their entire pregnancy. I had
Yeah.
zero nausea, zero this last pregnancy, apart from the 1 or 2 days that I did not drink my prenatal tea
Hmm.
that's very high in red raspberry leaf. Now, of course, I don't have any history of miscarriage, so I do appreciate that. I prefer to remove away all of this fear that's been put on. Well, you can't have red raspberry leaf to your first trimester, and I'm like, it's not
Yeah.
true the way they're saying it. But yeah, if you're one of those exceptions, and like you mentioned, like, yeah, you can be cautious. And there are some herbs that might help, such as squaw vine and false unicorn. You can
Yes.
look, there are ways that we can help with that. And even if my favorite place to consult with a woman is before she's even gotten pregnant, because then we can look at healing her gut, detoxing the heavy metals, detoxing whatever else needs to be detoxed, parasites and everything, so that if our body is really clean and really well nourished, I love using the herbs to re-nourish the body, um, then already those problems might kind of take care of themselves.
Mhm.
And if they don't, then there's additional herbs that you can use to help. So
I agree.
yay. Okay. I know there was a question. There was one question asked in advance that we haven't answered yet. And it was, what are your thoughts on using a tincture that includes blue cohosh, but not black cohosh for a few weeks before the due date?
Yeah, first of all, I'm wondering why this question is asked, but I know that both blue cohosh and black cohosh do help to balance the hormones in preparation for childbirth. And the blue cohosh in particular helps the uterus to contract. Um, so so I guess I'll answer by saying if there's one or the other, like for example, to do a natural induction, which I think is appropriate to consider doing once a woman gets to 42 weeks of her pregnancy, or if her blood pressure is rising or other reasons like that, then there are herbs and things that we can implement naturally to help her body go into labor. And I've clearly seen that blue cohosh is more effective than black cohosh for a natural induction. Because my understanding is that black cohosh maybe it tends to work more with the hormone balancing, and then the blue cohosh tends to do more of a uterus contraction. So what do I think about taking a formula that does not have the black cohosh? I think that that's fine, but you may have a little more hormone balancing effect if the or if the black cohosh is a part of the formula.
Yeah, and how I would answer that question, I agree with you, first off. In addition to that, I have used for my last two births, I've used Dr. Christopher's birth prep formula. That is to be used only in the last 6 weeks. And I thought it had blue cohosh in it, but it actually doesn't. It has squaw vine, blessed thistle, black cohosh, pennyroyal, false unicorn, red raspberry leaf, and lobelia.
Which I think is an excellent formula.
Yeah. For some women, it may increase the prodromal labor, whatever you want to call it, practice contractions and whatnot. In which case I have read that a person could get into a tub of ginger tea.
Help calm it down.
Yeah, which I thought, well, I didn't have access to a tub at the time, or I would have tried that. So I can't tell you my experience on that because I didn't do it. But I do think the birth prep helped my body a lot for both of those births. And also it can continue to be taken postpartum and might help with the body, with the uterus clamping down and preventing
Just
more hemorrhage and
recovery,
hormones.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I really like that one.
Oh,
Okay.
also something else to add on here is that blue cohosh does have the tendency to raise the blood pressure. So if you already have higher blood pressure, then that's something to consider, that maybe you don't want the blue cohosh. Yeah.
Yes. And would you agree that generally we would not be using blue cohosh at all unless it was at the very end?
Generally speaking, but I have seen it in 6-week formulas, and I think in small amounts, 6 weeks before the birth, it's not going to induce labor, but it might induce some practice waves.
Awesome. Okay, well, I'm not seeing any other questions coming in. Richelle, thank you so much for joining me on this. This was a lot of fun for me, obviously, because I kept it going longer than I said I would.
Oh yeah, sorry, I was thinking, oh, well, there was a question that you had submitted to me that somebody had submitted to you, I thought,
Okay.
along this topic.
Okay.
And have you noticed a difference in clients who use Dr. Christopher's birth prep formula during the last 4 to 6 weeks and those who haven't?
Mm.
So was that a question from you or?
Yes. Yeah, that was
Oh,
my
okay.
question.
I just wanted to be sure and answer questions that the public had submitted. But
Yeah.
anyway, that's a hard one to answer because there's so many factors involved in childbirth that it's hard to say, oh yeah, for sure this product had, see, because like for example, first births tend to be longer.
Right.
And so maybe somebody didn't take this formula with their first birth and then they took it during their second pregnancy and then they had a shorter process and then they're like, oh, this herbal formula is great, but they probably would have had a shorter process anyway because second births are almost always shorter. So
Yeah.
anyway, it's hard to measure, but I believe that it helps. And I always recommend to my first time moms for sure that they take this product. And also, my sister-in-law was a case study. She made herself a case study with the 6-week formula. She hated being pregnant, and so she she had this reasoning that okay, if I just take tons of the 6-week formula, then my baby's going to come sooner. And I'm so glad she did this because she showed that. So she actually started taking it more like 8 or 10 weeks before her due date.
Whoa.
And she would take about 10 times the recommended amount.
My
And then she
gosh.
would complain that she was up all night with contractions. But she never delivered early. But guess what? Her body got prepped and she would have 1 hour labors.
Wow.
So I'm glad
Yeah,
she
and
did that because she's a great case study.
yes. Well, and I think probably one of the most asked questions in any birth relevant group or forum is how do I get labor going? You know, women who were just super tired of being pregnant or their healthcare provider has said, you have to have your baby by this date, or we're going to induce or do a cesarean. Like
Yeah.
that's a common concern, right? And my personal feeling is that baby's going to come when that baby's ready, kind
Yep.
of no matter what you do.
Well, we can force babies out. Obviously, we see that with Pitocin, right?
Right, right,
Babies are forced out all the time with Pitocin. But
right,
even with Pitocin, sometimes it doesn't work.
right.
Um, but yes, I totally agree. You know, please, uh, please go away from these desires and this mindset of we want to control the process.
Right.
Surrender to the process, just like you need to surrender to the process when you're actually giving birth, or just like that is the number one key is to surrender during birth, surrender before the birth. Allow the baby the time that it needs, allow your body the time that it needs to prepare. All it does when a woman's trying to make herself go into labor sooner is it just elicits a bunch of anxious energy.
Yeah.
So yeah, there
Yeah.
needs to be a reason. And that's why I said earlier, I think it's appropriate to consider at 42 weeks to do an induction, just because we know that after 42 weeks, there is a higher rate of problems with the baby and the placenta. But yeah, so I totally agree.
Yeah. Yeah. So if we can notice, oh, I'm having all of this anxious energy about wanting to have my baby now, and it's not happening, arg, if we can transform that into, oh, what a gift. I can make myself a few more meals. I can make myself some, what I call padsicles, where you're pouring tea and aloe vera gel onto a pad and putting it in the freezer for postpartum. They're so nice. And or I can go out on a date with my husband that newsflash you might not be able to do for a really long time, depending on your situation. And then also I'm going to make sure that I am staying really well hydrated. I'm making myself like some really hydrating drinks. And I can take the 6-week prep and I can drink my decoction of red raspberry leaf, and it's not going to hurt me. It's only going to just continue preparing my body so that when the time is right, it will happen as smoothly as I have control, but not really over.
Also, it could be looked at as an opportunity to take on more trust, just trusting in the process, trusting in God, maybe seeking for inspired guidance or reassurance, um, spiritual reassurance. That's the angle that I would encourage a woman to go
Ah,
to expound on during that time.
yeah. And spending some time in journaling and prayer and exercise.
Yeah,
Um,
maybe journaling to discover, why am I so anxious about this?
yeah, absolutely.
You might get some
Oh, I just
insight.
love birth.
You might get some insight into yourself.
Yes, yes. And I wanted to say, you were talking about surrendering to the birth process earlier. And one thing that I really look forward to and that I've experienced in every birth, and if you're watching this and you haven't, like, maybe you can open yourself up to this experience next time, or otherwise, don't feel bad about it, but I'm just sharing my experience. One of my favorite things is that there's always a point where I feel angelic help. And my personal belief, as I teach with the herbs, is the herbs are nutritious and they do have actions and medicinal compounds that cause effects in the body. But if we're using them without asking for the help of God and participating in the atonement of Jesus Christ, that is really what's doing the healing, then we've kind of missed the mark. And I don't always remember to do this, but I really encourage people, pray over your herbs before you take them, and pray for your body to take them in correctly, and use that resource that we have. And so also, if you haven't experienced this yet, maybe spend some time before your birth considering, how can I allow a more spiritual environment in my birth. I like to memorize some hymns. I have a different hymn or a different spiritual song that comes to mind during each birth. And I don't know, it just happens and it sort of becomes the theme. And I find that when I'm humming that, even if I don't know all the words, I'm humming that or I'm singing that, sometimes the people around me will join in or they're not, but I still hear other music. And I really feel like birth was meant to be another way to connect us to our heavenly parents and to heaven in general. And so, I don't know.
For sure.
I hope more women can have that experience.
Yes, me too.
And at the bare minimum, hopefully we can experience that when we're holding our baby for the first time.
Because that's a piece of heaven right there.
Yep. Yep. Okay, cool. So we're going to wrap up here with how to get in touch with Richelle and how to get in touch with me, other resources that I have available. So if you are looking for a midwife in the Utah Valley or surrounding area, Richelle, what would you say is like your max?
Oh, well, my preference is an hour limit, but I'm willing to go an hour and a half, maybe 2 hours.
Yeah.
So,
Awesome. So if you're in that location, people, and you're watching, Richelle's website is jolleymidwife.com. JOLLEYMIDWIFE.com. So you can reach out to her there. This replay will be available for the next 30 days. Facebook has a new policy where live videos are not staying up forever. So I am going to figure out where I'm going to house all of these in the future, and I will let you know when I have that figured out. But in the meantime, for the next 30 days, this will be posted and alive in the group. So You can watch it again, even if you were here for part of it or all of it. Invite your friends to go watch it. And then I'll let you know where to watch it once it goes bye-bye. Thank you, Facebook. And and if you're new to this group as well, I try to go live at least once a month. Sometimes it doesn't always work out, but that's my goal. And you can look in the guides section at the top of the Herb Powered Pregnancy group. There's should be a little button that says guides. You click on that and you can see all different topics that I've either gone live on or shared a bunch of links about in the past. And so I am going to be bringing on a doula as well. So we'll talk about not just, what do you do for hemorrhage or tension, but additional comfort measures, be they herbal or otherwise. I do have resources available on everydayandexperiment.com as well as herbalembrace.com. You can find links below this video if you're watching the replay. I'm creating more and more PDFs that you can print. Often I'll have PDFs that have details around the topic, and then I'll have like a quick fact sheet that you can print and put in your kitchen cupboard. But I have one available specifically for pregnancy nausea. I'm almost done with the one for breastfeeding concerns. I have a lot of awesome personal experience with breastfeeding issues and how I've come out of them with natural methods. So I've been in the trenches and I've got some good stuff for you. Eventually this will all be part of one big book called The Herb Powered Pregnancy. And someday I will finish it, but I'm trying to focus on my human baby more than my digital baby. And then you can always reach out to me on Messenger, and I do offer consults as well. Again, this is for any woman who is considering pregnancy in their future through postpartum. And I have teenagers asking me for help. I have menopausal women asking me for help. Sometimes I have men asking me for help. So I don't turn down anyone, but that is the demographic that I am focused on. Okay, I think that's everything. Yeah, this was really great. Thank you so much. Feel free to reach out with any other questions or any other topics that you think we should go live on. And you can find Richelle at jollymidwife.com. Any last words from you, Michelle? Last words.
Oh, there was something. What was it? Looking up my notes here. Oh yeah. Yeah, my last words are, my desire is for there to be a generally new perspective on childbirth and pregnancy and childbirth, where we have a holistic view, and because people are not just physical bodies, and people are so when we're looking at the birth process, it's not just a physical process. This is a psychological process. This is very much a spiritual process, a mental process, an emotional process for the woman. And so when we approach it with that perspective, then we can complement her process. We can assist her process, as opposed to, oh, well, you're not progressing. Well, let's get some force in there and give you some more Pitocin, or, make something happen, which, anytime we force a natural process, we potentially are going to cause a complication. And so yeah, looking at the woman as a whole person and considering, okay, how are you feeling right now? Do you have an emotional concern that's affecting your progress, and addressing that emotional concern? And then once that's addressed, then she can progress. So, and it's okay. It's okay that you're not progressing at, this hour, now you're at 500. Okay, now,
Yeah.
we're not robots, and so if we can just I call it, or I would use the term honor. If we can honor the process, respect it, and view it holistically, then we're going to have the best outcomes. And the
1000%.
and the woman will get the experience out of it that was intended for her individually to get from this experience. Because it's a journey. It's a little journey that women go on that prepares them for parenthood. It's a journey where they have the opportunity to, where issues might come up, maybe from their past or from their childhood, and maybe from their relationship with their mother. And so it's an opportunity for them to work through those and process them so that they don't take that into their parenting. And so it really is perfectly designed. And when there is a delay in the process, it's not because there's a problem. It's because that specific process is in need of attention in a certain direction. So.
Absolutely. I know when I was in labor this last time, I was really I was resisting again because I was worried that you wouldn't quite make it in time, and there still would have been people who could have helped, but I still, I don't know. I wanted to know that you would be there. And so I was definitely resisting for a while, and I was just so tired, and I finally realized what I was doing to myself and making it more complicated, and I wasn't letting things happen at the time that my body was ready to let happen. And it just finally clicked in my brain, like, this baby's going to come and it's going to be fine. And if it's not, you'll be here soon. Like,
God is at the helm.
God is at the helm.
Yeah.
And I said, I'm so tired. I can't do this anymore. So I'm going to lay on the bed, and either I'm going to get a nap or I'm going to push this baby out. And it was nice to get that rest, and my body started pushing the baby out. So that was the surrender that I needed to do in that moment of just like, I can do this the easy way or the hard way. And it's true that mental and emotional letting go directly links to letting go of your pelvis. So good. Okay, is there one? I'm seeing a thing in the Kim says, it's so awesome when people are able to give birth in trailers. Yeah, I wouldn't wish it on anyone, but if anyone is facing giving birth in a trailer and wants some help working through that, I can talk to you. I feel like I need to bring someone on who specializes in prenatal, postnatal, kind of emotional care. I think that would be really good, because like you said, when you're carrying these things into the labor and delivery process, it can have a real impact, for better or for worse, and obviously afterwards as well. So, if I wish that all of us women having babies could have at least one person in our life that we could really work through these things as they come up. And so it's just part of the process. This is normal. This is what you do.
I mean, there are facilitators that specifically help us work through these things.
Yeah.
But
yeah, if you know any I can get in contact with, I would love that info.
Okay. Yeah, I'll send you an email.
Sounds good. All right. Well, my babysitter is probably wondering where I am. Thank you again. Thank you. We're going to end the call here, but hopefully not the conversation. So
Okay.
Bye, everyone.
It was fun. Bye.
Bye.